question. I want to start off by asking this question just to get, the juices flowing. Wilkerson uses many different metaphors to explain and help us visualize the concept of the American caste system, the bones inside a body, the beams inside a house. I learned something new myself, a mudsill. Even the computer program in the 1999 film, The Matrix. Of these metaphors, which one helped the Matrix? Of these metaphors, which one helped the concept click for you? Why was it successful? Also, let me tell you that I'm getting my book club questions off of a site called Rush. Just like we teachers say, why reinvent the wheel when the information is already out there? So I'm going to give my own disclaimer. I got it from somewhere else, but I think they're excellent discussion questions. So Wilkerson uses many different metaphors to explain and help us visualize the concept of the American caste system, the bones inside a body, the beams inside a house, even the computer program in the 1999 film, The Matrix. Of these metaphors, which one helped the concept click for you? Why was it successful? Anybody? Just think about it for a minute.
So I guess I got unmuted. So I'll take a stab at it. I'm not sure that any one of those actually was particularly, it didn't ring a bell for me. I think it was the constant changing of the metaphor that she was able to state it in so many different ways that each one of them gave a different part of the face that you started to see. And eventually you got more of a portrait of the whole system. And I think it was the multiple different metaphors that she chose that each of them individually successful, but it was the combination of them that it struck it for me. It's a complex picture, and so any one metaphor isn't going to quite reach it. And I thought she would brilliantly intersperse those throughout the entire book to give the particular metaphor that was related to the topic she was talking about at that particular time. It was beautiful.
John had his hand up.
Yes, I was going to recommend.
No, I have not finished the book, but I read it with interest. I'm always a slow reader. I always milk all my books, but I do look forward to reading it. And the one that has struck me is the bones in the body. I mean, in other words, it's just like it's very structural. It's not going to change no matter what you do internally. The structure is still there, and it becomes, therefore, to me, such a difficult thing to change because it's the bones of the body. It is just so hard, and it's a structure that we have grown up with, that and just, it's been there the whole time. And so the idea that civilizations past have chosen this construct to be so tight that you can't get around it. And this is back to India, how you've chosen that system to be so tight, you can't get around it. This is what you're born into. You're stuck there, whether you like it or not. You're going to have that caste, that designation throughout your life. And so it's helps me understand, but it also is just frankly some way disheartening because it's so ingrained.
Yeah, I agree with that too, John. And it goes back, one of the good examples of what you're talking about, I believe, is Colin Kaepernick, the football player. No matter how skilled he was, and he was in front of an audience of the world watching him, when it came down to him actually having a voice and deciding that he was going to do this for a group of people, he's going to bow the knee for a group of people, he was automatically put back in the caste system. He was never out of it, but it became so blatant that To me, when I read this, is like, oh my gosh, that's what happened to Colin Kaepernick.
Mhm.
Rising above that, as a football player, someone who's really admired, we fought before that, and then to be cast back into a subordinate clause. I mean, a cast was like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes, Bob? Oh, you're muted.
Okay. I agreed with what John said in terms of the bones in the body. And one of my thoughts about that metaphor was that, you know, if you break your bone in the body and you disobey the rules about how to bend an arm or whatever, you suffer a lot of pain, and your body starts working to heal that and get it right back in place as soon as it can. And you can't stop that. I mean, you could keep fighting it, but your body keeps the system around those bones keeps pushing it back to get back in place and behave yourself and stay where you belong. So I really like that metaphor for myself in terms of how people react and the pain associated with breaking those bones or moving those bones the wrong way is for me was a really good metaphor.
All these responses are deep. What spoke to me was the bones and the skin, because I never, before reading Caste, I never thought of the American system as a caste system, because I talk about things in terms of race, and race is a social construct, and I just never looked at it below the surface. The mud sill makes me think of. It made me think about when we started this pandemic, when the pandemic started, and people would always talk about the frontline workers. And the frontline workers is what kept everything going. The frontline workers are the ones that died first, the frontline workers, because they are the mud sill. They are the foundation that really keeps this society and America moving forward. The bus drivers, the train conductors, the nurses, the janitors. So I made me think about who, these frontline workers, the people that we recognized every day in New York City, clapping our hands. And when I was there during the beginning of the pandemic, cleaning pots, letting them know you matter, the doctors matter, the nurses matter, the janitors, anybody that was working to save lives every day at the beginning of the pandemic. So yeah, it made me think about that's what clicked for me. It made me see this American structure that we live in as a caste system. Anybody else want to add before I move on? Anybody? Okay, well, I want to go and talk about Wilkerson often uses her own experiences as an African-American woman to illustrate her points regarding caste and the confusion when someone rises above his or her presumed station. Sorry. What do you think readers gain from hearing about Wilkerson's personal experiences in addition to her deep historical research? So she often refers to her own experiences as an African-American woman in this society. And I want to know the question is, what do you think readers gain from hearing about Wilkerson's personal experiences when she kind of stepped out of her quote place? And in addition, what do you think the reader gains from her deep historical research?
I like this a lot because it could go into necessarily the response or what is the true intentions necessarily behind hers. As I'll say, like for me, as I compare it to my time in college, where oftentimes you can find someone share like, hey, I'm going to be the first Black person to do this. I'm gonna be the first Black man. I'm gonna be the first Black woman to do this. And sometimes, like, sure, it's like, congratulations, I guess. But then again, it's like, are you saying that to like, belittle like people in your own community sometimes? Or you might say like, okay, I'm a Black woman. I'm here. Like, I'm better than other Black men in this position. Or I'm a Black male. I'm better than. Or I can see how some people could take in that perspective, or I can see how it'd be questioned because that's just what goes on currently now, where it's like you can raise into question a lot of motives or agendas behind people. But in that does provide context where you are able still to see that rise within the cast. And maybe just me even sharing that previous comment how that's so strong and embedded within a caste where you have that divide and conquer type mentality or that crab in the barrel type of mentality where even though you might be doing good, you find people who necessarily still want to like hate or throw shame on somebody rather than like supporting and uplifting. Where it is kind of like a poison where you want to do good. And even myself being like a young teacher in the classroom, I want to do a lot of work for the kids, but I'm like, man, like there's so much I want to be able to expose you all to, but there's just little foundational things that I can't necessarily provide to you all because there's certain things that you all are missing that would do more harm than good of me putting you in spaces that I would love for you all to be in. Just because you have to do some work that's on your own that I can't be able to foster in this hour and a half that I have with you in the classroom to be able to try to help you be on the trajectory I would like you to be in.
Mhm. Well, yes, you can. As a teacher, yes, you can. Yes, we have to teach the foundation, not to get off point. Yes, we have to teach the foundation and the curriculum, but yet you can still keep planting those seeds of dreaming and hope. And even just saying, if you just self-discipline, you can get to where you want to, you just have to intertwine it. So, but I appreciate your response. Anybody else? Yes, Bill?
So hang on a second. There. I was particularly helped by her bringing the mechanism of the caste and how the caste system and how it worked down to the really, really personal level. Each time she would talk about her own experience, I was given an insight into our society that through eyes that I never would have had myself as a white man. Even as a white gay man, I don't see that. And so each one of those was an eye opener for me. And it made me understand how the caste system affects people that are different from myself. And how my own actions could be making that a worse situation rather than a better one. And so I'm more often now to look at a situation and go like, oh, I see the caste system working here. And how can I step outside of it and act like a human being instead of somebody who's a member of the caste that I'm in? And if somebody reacts a certain way, I can stop and go like, I can put myself now into their shoes as best I can and see it from their point and go like, oh, I can see how this is acting. And it makes perfect sense now, where it would not have before.
Yeah. Thank you. That's true. It's so unconscious, because you have to be aware of what is going on in order to recognize what's going on.
This book has just brought all of that right to the fore for me. And I'm really grateful for it. I'm very grateful.
Yes. I like when Evelyn said, she mentioned Colin Kaepernick and talking about how when he took a knee, that was stepping out of his place, and how we're so quickly reminded. I think about just this whole reaction, this whole thing we've been going through since, I want to say, really it really goes back to 2008, when we the nation elected its first African-American president. That was something I never thought I would see in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. So I was just as stunned and jubilant as a lot of people. I do feel the backlash that we are experiencing and this resurgence of caste, not that caste ever went away, but this resurgence of caste goes back to us having a twice elected African-American president. That's a disequilibrium. That's how dare these people step out of their place, quote, place. And I think that, because caste made me think about what we're dealing with today. And I think we know that it was a backlash to put someone so truly unqualified into that office. It could have been, I don't care if it was a Republican, it didn't have to be him. Could have been C.E.C. I'm a fan of C.E.C, even though, not getting his political, but I like a lot of where he's coming from. He would have been a better president. But all of this is a reaction. and the disequilibrium that we are, having to get things like, as John said, back into place. And we're living through this, a manufactured place, but a place nonetheless. It's very dangerous. Yes.
So I have to agree, this is a backlash, and it shows you just how strong the caste system is, that it would actually accept fascism as the method of getting back control. And that's very frightening to me.
Yes, you know what, you're taking us to the place. I'm sorry, yes, Evelyn?
I think Bob had a comment. His hand
Oh,
was
I'm
up.
sorry, I'm sorry. Yes, Bob, you're on mute.
I'm trying, okay. I actually just read something this past week about all of the laws that are being passed at state levels to limit voting rights. And what really struck me was that apparently those laws that have been generated, there are hundreds of them all over the country, actually started back in 2008 as a reaction to the first Black president. And I had no awareness of that, but apparently that's back when it started, and it's just gotten worse and worse with the last presidency we had. So it shows the kind of reaction to this stepping out of bounds.
Yeah, I think we have to go back a little bit further than 2008, though. If you look at history and the progression of African Americans not having the ability to vote, and a lot of this is based around that one big issue. And then the subordination, all of it goes back so far in history. And it's almost like, when you have an auto part of your car recalled, this is like a recall, but it's being redeveloped, to where the younger generation is coming on board to grab hold of it. And, and I'm listening to you guys talk now, because a lot of what Isabel was sharing, and I've shared this before, is what I experienced myself growing up in Texas, and this is just another long, deep, ugly, blatant chapter of that same stuff. But now it's been more pronounced, though, because I just read something recently, and you hear it all the time too, the messaging that's been projected out there by the opposition is strong. Ours is not.
No.
We have the weakest message ever, from my perspective. So we let it happen, and we see it happen, and we might give it maybe a clip of a response, and that's not going to cut it.
It's especially with the Republicans branding the Democrats as pedophiles. I mean, that's serious. Democrats are not fighting back as hard as they should. I think because they're still trying to play fair and stay within the lines. So they're still coming from a humane place, which is good and bad, because they're not fighting the way they need to. But nevertheless, I lost my train of thought. What he was saying about the laws and staying in place. I forgot what I was getting ready to say just that quick. Anyway, it'll come to me. I hate that. I hate that. But anybody else want to comment? Thank you for that.
I'll chime in. So I think what you're also seeing is that there's when the caste system needs to pull together, it does.
Yes.
And
Yes.
When the rest of everybody else is kind of left like scratching their heads, like, where's this coming from?
Exactly.
And it's not like they're unified, because they don't have a unifying structure to rally with, or to carry out their desires. So you end up seeing this really sporadic, kind of scattered resistance without necessarily any structure around it. And that's to be expected. That's how the system holds itself together. The caste system continues.
You know what? And you said a mouthful there. It's also came and went again. It's also an allegiance. talking about caste and then passing these laws, and that someone said they'd rather accept fascism than to work with democracy because of inherent false belief of superiority. The reason I say it's false belief because it was gotten through torture, it was gotten through theft, it was gotten through lies. It's unearned and untrue superiority. I say be careful what you ask for. My sister and I were talking about that the other day. Be careful what you ask for. They're so busy trying to put a fascist system in place so that they can still, now I'll say the dominant race can still feel superior, but the question is, will you be able to function under, I'm talking about the Americans, function under a fascist society? And I'm talking about white Americans. They gotta be careful what they ask for. If we can't deal with mask, we can't deal with no. It's not only gonna, it's not, if they are successful in putting this in place, it's not gonna just be about Black folks, brown folks, and non-whites. We are adaptable. Black people, we've lived under authoritarianism in this country, in the South. So we'll just adapt real quick. Brown people, they'll adapt real quick. So the issue is gonna be is it's sad, but we can function under that kind of a system because we have, and we know how to be creative. But when you're dealing with a dominant race that's used to having everything their way, and the pandemic laid that bare and really reminded me, then what are you gonna do when, because these same powerful white people, and these, by the way, these donors are writing billionaires are writing 8-digit checks to the GOP. So they're helping to put this in place because it is control of white supremacy. But then the whites who are everyday white people gonna have to ask themselves, when they turn on them, how are we going to function? Yeah, they might, feel like, yeah, I feel like I'm better, but so what? That gets old after a while. What are you gonna do when they start telling you what to do and taking your stuff and limiting? That's gonna be very interesting. And it falls in the caste, and people be upset and say, I'm being treated like a Black person. No, this is what you wanted. So they have to step back and think about, be careful of what we ask for. Democracy can work, but people have to let go of their fears. They have to start to see other people's perspectives. Not everybody has the same worldview. We don't have the same worldview. And I think that we have to learn to function by seeing other people's perspectives. Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I fully agree. And I've been reading a rather interesting book that goes back and looks at, once the Constitution was put before the states for ratification, there was a huge controversy about it. And there was a lot of discussion about this is going to turn into despotism and tyranny, and this is the only way to save liberty and all the rest. And it was a very, very active and very hard fought thing to get that ratified. And during that, so this book takes all of the things from newspapers and letters and everything and puts it out there so you can read them. Very interesting. But one of the things that caught my eye was by Judge James Wilson of Pennsylvania. And he was talking about what does liberty really mean? And he was taking it back to, he said, liberty in the natural sense, where you have natural liberty means you can do anything really that you want. But as a person living in society, when you add in another person, you end up with a different situation. And you realize very soon that you can't do just everything you want, because if you agree that everybody else should do that too, then they're doing things to you that you don't want them to. So at some point you have to relinquish some of your own liberty to the group liberty and the civic liberty, you called it, so that you can all live together. And what you realize is the little bit of liberty that I gave up is enough to make it better for everyone. And so I'm willing to do that. And you realize that you have to do that in order for you to live in a functioning society. And so he goes on about that. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. And it's something I think we're starting to lose track of.
Yes.
we don't seem to be doing that very much. I'm not understanding our own liberty in the context of a social setting.
Yes.
So we need to make sure people understand that.
Yes.
But I don't think that they're going to do that. And that's my problem. I see ahead of us, I see the fascism stuff coming so to ahead so fast that people, even in the people who are in the upper castes, levels of the caste, are going to be so surprised by it that they're not, and they're probably going to go like, well, if I don't jump on board, I'm going to be left behind. So they're going to jump on board. It's the kind of thing she discusses in the latter portions of the book. And so I'm a little concerned about that. But I also have some hope in that. I believe our younger generations are not going to settle for that. I don't think they're going to be happy with that notion once they see how it's actually working. My hope is, though, that they can rebel against that before it becomes ingrained to the point they can't succeed.
Yes. And anybody else? I'm sorry, because I tend to talk 3 minutes. I talk double the time Evelyn gave us. Anybody else want to comment? I mean, what you said is a whole mouthful. Yes, Casey? You want to answer? You want to talk?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to leave to take my daughter somewhere, but I just, something you said, Suzanne, and something Miss Evelyn said kind of triggered a couple of things for me. Before I leave, you were talking about how, the dominant caste has to watch what they wish for, type of thing. And it just made me think of World War II and the Holocaust and the famous, I don't even know who it was. It's like a famous thing where it's like, first they came for the Jews and then, and then, and it's that same thing. They're coming for everyone. So it's like,
it's everyone.
So longer you stand back and be quiet, eventually they're coming for you. And it just reminded me of what you were saying, kind of with watch what you wish for.
Yes.
And also, I think it was Miss Evelyn that said how we're so bad at messaging on the Democratic side. And I just wondered if anyone had heard, it was in Michigan, State Senator Mallory something or other. Yeah, I just think it's a good model for, we always are cowing to, we're always playing on their field and not speaking up and like, well, we shouldn't. And it just seemed like a really good example of how to fight back. And I have to go, but thank you so much. I read this book when it came out and I just think it's so important and I'm glad that it's back in discussion.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. And also I want to say before you go, Casey, we're down here in Georgia. Like I said, I learned a lesson this last election that don't count things out because this redneck state went purple. We went blue. I say what America did, and this is white, Black, because we are whites and Blacks. We are the two biggest groups. Okay. And then Hispanics, Asians, everybody else, we pulled together regardless of our political ideologies, whatever. We pulled together because we saw a clear and present danger. Okay, whites who usually Republicans went Democrat, not because they care about the social, they cared about the thousands of people dying today. They cared about the direction. And we need to have that same kind of coming together, not changing voting laws to accommodate a thief, a liar, and a fascist. It's so scary. But I believe, like Bill, there is a hope in the future. We have to have that hope. But thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Casey.
Casey, I put in the chat, I put a link to that thing by Senator Mallory. McMorrow.
Yeah, everyone should watch it if they haven't. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. And I also want to say thank you to I see my friend, my dear friend and prayer partner, Gina, is here on the call. I want to say thank you, Gina, for coming and welcome, joining us this Sunday afternoon. But yes, I also wanted to bring up, and this book was so deep. It was so deep. And I wanted to annotate my books. And I wrote not only all the stuff that I was reading was sadistic and evil, but I was also talking about CRT, anti-critical race theory laws that are being passed. Me being an educator here in Georgia, they have passed the laws, and it will probably, the laws come in effect in July. So yeah, a lot of us are talking as fast as we can before it becomes law, about what truth is and what the truth is. But the anti-CRT laws seek to shut down any discussion. It reinforces inhumanity. I read the laws closely. It says you are not allowed to talk about racism. There is no racism, there is no oppression. I thought that was crazy. DeSantis signed a law, and like many of the other Republican governors, he signed in the law of don't say gay, that they're going to take the taxes away from, the self-governance away from Disney. That he also signed a law that he can redistrict the voting maps down there, which takes away the power from Black voters and put 2 Republican seats in play. And he also, when he signed the anti-CRT law and how we're going to talk about racism, he said, and history, he said, yeah, we can talk about slavery, but we cannot talk about racism or oppressed. So I'm saying, okay, well, what you did was just racist. You had the Florida legislature come back, and they were all in agreement with the redistricting map, and they were okay with the fact that it gave Black voters power. You said no. They said, okay, we'll give you what you want. But then you turn around and say, well, there's no racism, there's no oppression. That's ridiculous in itself. The fact that we talk about, oh, we can't talk about racism or talking. I'm telling you this, I've been teaching middle school for 25 years. What they're talking about is not true. Nobody teaches critical race theory on our level. And I teach in a predominantly Black setting. Nobody stands there. I'm talking about myself, and I know a lot of other teachers. We don't stand there and talk about white people in a bad way at all. We talk about the system, because that's our job. That would be our job. That's prejudice. That would be our job if we put down other people like that. So that's just manufactured.
Suzanne,
I'm sorry.
As you're speaking, it sounds like, and you can correct me on this one, it sounds like a lot of what's going on, even in other states too, but specifically in Florida, is more like, for me, pillar number 6, that's that dehumanization.
Yes, that's where I was going. That's exactly where you were ahead of me when you're talking about dehumanization. Because when they say, we don't want to talk about what happened in the past because it might make our children feel bad. Well, that's reinforcing inhumanity, and it's dehumanizing that these people, you went there. That's exactly where I was going. Thank you. It's bad when you take kids to lynchings. And you see dead bodies, and these are documented facts. And they walk away. They lost their humanity. The fact that you could pass down postcards. And I know I'm just short of it, a woman in 1989 on a Greyhound bus trip from Atlanta to Virginia. I was going to see my grandmother. She got off in South Carolina. White lady told me about these postcards, lynching postcards I had no idea of. But so it's true. But it puts in, these people don't matter. It's inhuman. They don't matter. What makes me scared about them banning all of these books, everything is important that we learn, math, science, social studies, language arts, but literature gives us a basis, gives us a basis for where we should go, why this shouldn't happen, why this is wrong. But
I think Bill might have led into this a few minutes ago. When I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but when he was speaking, what I was thinking about, I just read recently that I think it's New York Public Library System that has offered a link nationwide where you can check out any book you want to read digitally, any book.
Yes.
And so I think that's going to be, I'm hoping that's going to be, people are going to catch on to that one, because when you tell me, I've always been this kind of personality, you tell me I can't do something if it's not going to be harmful, I will do it. I've never been able to be positioned to say, oh, you're not good enough for that. You can't do that. My past phrase has always been, watch me.
Yes.
And so when I read that with New York System, I'm thinking we need to really project that, because even the books have been pulled out in the South. That's just one area. We get caught up in that rhetoric. We should not get caught up in that rhetoric. What we should be sharing more is what people are doing to counteract that. We're not.
We're
They
not.
want to have a counteracting message. Let people know, oh my gosh, go to New York System and check out your books. And
Yes.
read your books.
And also, I think it shows how out of touch, though, being as educated, the GOP is with society. They're just trying to cement white supremacy, but they don't understand is people don't read the way they, like the kids. Let me talk about the students. The kids don't read the way they think they read, because oftentimes they don't have time to go to the library. I do have some children ask me, Ms. Parker, can I go to the library? Sure. But for the most part, we're so on that schedule. And then kids are all into TikTok and video, all that kind of stuff. But so I like that, and that is the way we can combat. Disinformation is very dangerous. I also caught my attention in Pillar 8 is inherent superiority versus inherent inferiority. That is so dangerous. And we don't even have to look in terms of race. We can look at it in terms of, it's dangerous. Let me put it to you like this, and somebody can jump in and correct me. It's dangerous. Even let's just take just white people alone. We're looking at it now. You have very intelligent, very educated white people in government whose voices are being silenced because you got people who are not educated, don't know what they're talking about, leading. That's scary. And that's what we have going on. So, I mean, I'm just taking just within the white race itself. I have seen inherent superiority versus inherent inferiority. I think it's unconscious. I have seen it, and I'll say this because it's safe to say this. I have seen it when I have worked summer school in the past, when we used to have Teach for America. These people who were supervisors were not to the level of the staff that was there, who's there year round, who had doctorates, who were very well versed in their subjects, but yet they were following the instructions of the people who were less qualified. And it did fall along racial lines. And I found that to be interesting. So I saw that happen real time. Anybody's ever worked in corporate America will see that happen real time. And there's a danger in that. Did anybody get to Pillar 8? And we could look at it racially or within our own race. That's dangerous whenever you have someone who is less educated, less qualified, leading the masses. Anybody want to comment on that? That struck me. You know, yes, Bill?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting chapter in particular because as she points out, caste system isn't just based on race. There's other attributes that play into any person's particular position within the caste system. And if you look at it, I mean, it's clear that superiority versus inferiority is the same kind of thing that's at the root of sexism or ageism as it is anything to do with race. The whole, I can't tell you, growing up in the 60s, you didn't look to women to be leaders. I mean, women were not leaders. They weren't allowed, they just weren't leaders. So you didn't expect that of them. And it took the feminism movement in the 70s to put everybody right about that. But we still see it. You still see it all the time. If you look within any particular level of the caste system, you'll see that there are divisions based on gender as well.
Yeah.
Well, see, I think the Republicans, well, at least I should say, not necessarily Republican, but the white supremacy movement has always been focused on maintaining their superiority. And I might be repeating what's supposed to have already been said here. And when you talk about the inherent superiority versus the inherent inferiority, even today, as we look at the Republican Party, they have a fear. There's words I think that are very critical here. We have superior, power, fear. And when you have fear and power together, those are very, I will almost want to say, I'll use the word critical. They're critical. And what the Republicans are doing, find themselves in right now is that fear of losing their power. And so rather than saying, you know what, yeah, we're all equal, under God as a constitution, as we have read before. But we can't let that happen. They've never been able to let that happen from the very beginning. That's why we have a caste system. And so today, basically, the fight is on. And I don't want to give them that much credit, but I think what we're doing here with this book club right now, small group, but people who have other people we can talk with, we have to make sure that the message that we're learning here and the strategies that we're learning here is that we don't just keep them to ourselves. We have the responsibility now, I believe, to continue to educate ourselves more and everyone else we know.
Well said. Do we have what, 10 more minutes? 11
And I
minutes?
think Bob had his hand up too.
Yeah, I recently read an economic article about the ultra rich in this country, and the division of wealth in this country is getting way out of hand, and how the folks who are wealthy can now control the politics because of the donation of money, and they also tend to support the Republicans and support the issue of cultural. He called it culture wars between the races, between levels of people who are working, union people versus non-union and all that stuff. And they want to stir up all that stuff and get Republicans in office because they give them tax breaks, they give them all kinds of privileges, and that they're in some ways worse than the fascist government that they're willing to support because they could live with that and they would prefer that. And I don't know, but money has become a huge, huge factor in our whole system, I think, and pretty dangerous one. I don't know what we do with that, but my fear is that, we're fighting between races and arguing about this and that, while these folks are just stand back and watch and collect all the money. It's kind of scary for me.
Paul, thank you. Paul had his hand up.
Yes, I love how Bob segued to the economical standpoint, as that's always a huge factor. I think of how the first initial thought when I see how COVID spiraled, I question a lot of people's actual genuine leadership. So you're a position of elected leadership, but do you really demonstrate what it's like to be a leader, and how you can either pander or you can support a message that doesn't actually support the majority, or people don't have a consensus in regards to how to properly address situations. So which was really unique from this time span, especially reflecting from these 2 years, how that statement of once you go woke, you go broke is actually a big thing. Where I think about it how people made it within the NFL, the NBA, where you put necessarily campaigns and messages and slogans without actually talking and addressing the people, and how you can't necessarily have a difference of opinion, but just also get into a level of just conversation where it's okay, if I may not be the supporter of Black Lives Matter, I'm not automatically assumed a bad person or something. It made people view themselves as enemies if you didn't share the same thinking or just the same pattern or disagreement, where it's it's something very minuscule, but now you're perceiving me as being a very bad or disreputable person, where now that started a cancel culture type of thing. All of this really spiraled from that. So I think of how it said, we were saying having a blind lead the blind, that's a huge factor. It's okay, sure, I might like pineapples on pizza, but what does that do with anything? But it's me liking pineapples on pizza, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, just don't ever listen to this person. That's the mindset a lot of people have when they converse now, which can be totally just different in the outset.
You know what? You said a whole lot and you were spot on. I watch the news a lot and I read the news a lot. And, they're talking about the upcoming election because, they're looking forward past the midterms of 2024. And they said it right on MSNBC. They said, because, the Republicans are fixing it so that they're going to cheat their way into power and, cheat their way, which is very dangerous. And they said, if you all put a president who was not elected, You see what I'm saying? You cheated your way there and you put someone, you go against the will of the people. This will not be the United States of America anymore. And then he said, he put it out there. He said, so after you do all this cheating and all, like you're saying, the blind leading the blind, what is going to be your goal? We are not going to be the United States of America anymore. So what is your plan for us after you do all of this stuff? He said, because we will not be the same country on the world stage. You cannot be the same country. He was saying, when you have cheated your way there, you have put a leader in place against the will of the people. And I realized, I was like, wow. So we have a lot to think about. We have a lot to do. I'm frustrated because we've got to do something about the voting laws. Maybe, you know, I'm an optimist, but I feel like if you don't do something on the federal level, I don't know how the democracy will survive. I'm counting, maybe there'll be enough blue states to carry us. I don't think so. To save the union, I don't know. But I know that we're going to have to do something to counteract this march towards fascism and self-destruction. I know we have 6 more minutes left. Anybody want to comment? I want to move to, as we wrap this up, I was looking at what are some of the steps that society can take and each of us can take towards dismantling the caste system. I want to put that out there as I read something from the epilogue. Anybody want to say, what can we do? And you know, you might say, Suzanne, that's terrible to think that way. I'd rather live in a class system than a caste system. Why? Because class system allows mobility. Even if you, and to a certain extent, we have had classism in this American society. And you might correct me, my grandmother was, she had 3rd grade education and she washed clothes for white people, but my daddy went on to college and became a clinical psychologist, worked for the state of New York until he retired. That's classism, because he was able to move up from, you know, even though he was dealing with caste, he was also class because he was able to move. Okay, so anybody want to give some suggestions? Because I turned to page 382.
Can you repeat that question, please?
What are some of the steps that society can take and each of us can take toward dismantling the caste system? And that's why I said I'd rather live in a class system than a caste system, because there's mobility in class.
I'll chime in there. I think one of the most interesting things that I got from the book is the fact that she does not answer that question.
Yeah.
I was, you know, getting all the way through the book going like, and so what can I do about this? What can we do about this? You know, I want to see, tell me what, you know, what are your suggestions? And she is absolutely silent on that issue. And I was angry at first until I realized that that failure to answer that question puts it on us as readers to figure out how to deal with this. And my own feeling is that probably the best way you can deal with it is to flatten the caste system so that it has very few castes instead of so many. And so you get down to, you know, if you can get down to fewer of them, then there's greater equity amongst all of them. But that's about all I can come up with for it, because it's not easy. The other thing is to be aware of it, to try whenever you can, recognize your own failings at it, and at propagating it, and try to make amends when that's necessary, and to look at people in a different way than you've been taught to.
Okay, Kate, thank you so much, Kate. And welcome.
Hi, thank you. Sorry it's late. I think it's Evelyn that is always saying, I can't control other people, what they think or what they say, but I can control myself. And I think what I've been seeing is the language that we use instead of saying slaves, you know, it changes who these people are. It almost makes it like they're deserving of being slaves, like they always were. And I think as we evolve our language and terminology, you know, and instead of saying, you know, slave holders or, whatever, change that language to encapsulate the behavior and the activity that was happening so that the colonization is focused on and the supremacy has a new spin. It's not something to be proud of. People were proud to be slave owners. It's kind of like the superiority. And I'm wondering if we can evolve our language, to say, oh, those people who kidnapped, stolen lives, raped and pillaged
Yes.
and assaulted innocent men, women, and children
Yes.
versus, slaveholder.
But you know
Slaveholder
what?
sounds innocent and I can control that. I can say that. That's my language. People can take all my books away, but they can't stop me from saying that.
From
And so,
from believing it, from knowing it, and that's what the fight is in the classroom. I just want to say one thing I see Evelyn's head. I just want to read one thing as we wrap this up. I agree with you, but we have to be careful of terminology. You're right, tell the truth. But what I have seen is in one textbook when they were talking about slavery, they talked about the plantation owners as entrepreneurs and the slaves as workers. When I pulled the lesson one time from Nearpod, and I was teaching a co-teacher, they talking about slavery in Latin America, they transported humans. And I stopped the lesson right there. Humans, I said, humans could be anybody. I said, let's talk about who these people were. Because it was a predominantly black setting. I said they were black people like me and like you. They were people of African heritage. So it's very important. Yes, Evelyn, then I would just like to finish up on 385 as we wrap it up.
Okay, maybe this has nothing to do with anything, but it's what's on my mind right now. I think we have to be more proactive in everything we do. We're looking too much at what's already happened. We know the caste system's there, but what do we do? And my focus right now is on voter registration.
Yes.
That's how you're going to break out of a lot of this right now, is that we get to the polls to make sure they understand their voice matters. We might not, I think we will have an easier chance of working through the voting process right now than we do a caste system that's been around for a long time.
Awesome. You are so right. And can I finish up with this? Right. You are so right. And we also have to put pressure we got to do something about these laws before the midterm, because that's what is discouraging to me as a voter. These laws where we're going to overthrow the election. We're going to overthrow what y'all say anyway. That bothers me. But I just want to finish up with this. It's in Caste. It's on page 385. And it says, our era calls for a public accounting of what caste has cost us, a truth and reconciliation commission so that every American can know the full history of our country, wrenching though it may be. The persistence of caste and race hostility and the defensiveness about anti-Black sentiment in particular make it literally unspeakable to many in the dominant caste. You cannot solve anything you do that you do not admit exists, which could be why some people may not want to talk about it. It might get solved. We must make every effort to ensure that the past injustice, violence, and economic discrimination will be made known to the people. Einstein said in an address to the National Urban League that taboo, let's not talk about it, must be broken. It must be pointed out time and again that the exclusion of a large part of the colored population from active civil rights by the common practices is a slap in the face of the Constitution of the nation. The challenge for our era is not merely the social construct of Black and white, but seen through the many layers of a caste system that has more power than we as humans should permit it to have. Even the most privileged of humans in the Western world will join a tragically disfavored caste if they live long enough. They will belong to the last caste of the human cycle, that of old age. People who are among the most demeaned of all citizens in the Western world, where youth is worshipped to forestall thoughts of death, and caste system spares no one. So I will end there. Thank you for allowing me to facilitate this study of caste. Caste is very deep and we can go on and on and on with discussion, but that is food for thought. It doesn't matter what your color is, what your socioeconomic is. All of us if we live long enough, will join the cast of old age. And I have been in nursing homes, and assisted living are not as bad, but I've been to nursing homes and assisted living, and people are forgotten and cast aside. And some of these people were powerful people at one time, you know. So it's something for us all to think about. So thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this book.